let me ask you a tough one. Okay, what do you say to all of the people who are like, stop making distros and put your resources and your energy and your money behind a flagship distro? Stop the fragmentation. What do you say to those people?
So here's the thing. Do we see Android phone manufacturers stopping modding Android anytime soon?
No,
W-
because their
Because
overlays
right,
make them unique, right?
exactly. We want we want distros that cater to a specific audience, just like how Android phone manufacturers want their phones to cater to a certain audience. Look at
mhm.
Samsung, for instance. The Note lineup is supposed to cater towards productivity, business people. So the One UI skin that they have has certain modifications in it that when you have that S Pen available, you have new features like being able to draw on your screen when you take a screenshot, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's still Android, it's just super modified. It's the same thing with Linux. It's great that you won't only have a stock Linux. I guess you would consider a stock Linux something like Debian, Ubuntu, Arch, Fedora, OpenSUSE, what you would probably consider the grandfather distros,
Sure.
the things that everything else is based off of.
Mhm.
And that's great. But you're going to want sometimes a modified distro that caters to something very specifically. For instance, there is a distro, I don't think it's publicly available, for a specific supercomputer in China. And they made their own specific distro because they wanted to get the most performance possible out of their supercomputer, which makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, yeah. I actually think that the existence of Pop OS is a good argument against those types of people.
Right. I agree.
Because System 76 came along and they said, "Look, we love what Ubuntu does, but we want to do things just slightly differently, and we want to be able to have, we want to be able to give people support for bleeding edge hardware while still being on an LTS base." And like, I love that System 76 came along when Zen 2 launched and solved that boot problem and then passed that solution on to everybody else. That was brilliant. And if they didn't exist, or if maybe that solution would have taken months to see the light of day versus hours or days to see a fix.
Right.
Um,
And
y-
that also leads me into my other reason for why I think having multiple distros is a good idea. So I have a very engineering type mind. I'm very much a problem solver. And one of the ways groups of engineers tackle big problems is through friendly cooperative competition.
hmm.
So basically,
Co-opetition. Co-opetition.
yes, yes, coopetition. Um, Basically, the idea of it is let's look at Fedora and Ubuntu, for example. Okay. They're both trying to cater towards a somewhat similar audience, their general users, right? They also want to cater towards corporate because they want to be used in business. But so they're competing in that aspect. If Fedora gets a feature that Ubuntu would probably benefit from, then Canonical is going to start working on either taking the exact same code in Fedora and porting it to Ubuntu or copying it. One of
Hmm.
those two. Fedora is going to do the exact same thing. If they see a feature in Ubuntu that they think will benefit Fedora, then they'll either copy the code right over or they'll try to copy it on their own, replicate it. But let's look at something like Boothole, for example. For those of you who don't know, Grub had an issue where there was a vulnerability in it and it got patched, thankfully. But this was a collaborative effort to fix in all distros. And that was collaborative, it wasn't competition. So the engineers, they know when it's best to work together because they understand that, hey, we're all using the same base. We're all working towards the same common goal, getting Linux into the hands of the masses, making it easy, making it usable on as much hardware as possible.
Hmm.
But at the same time, we're a corporate setting. We have competition, and the people we're trying to work with are our competition. So we're trying to take the features that we see in other distros and bring them over while at the same time helping them out, you know? And that's a really weird way of thinking, but it pushes everyone to get better.
Sure, it challenges the developers, I think, to aspire to better things and to make
Right.
their product because, I mean, let's face it, maybe not a super viable example, but let's look at, Intel versus AMD in the CPU space, right?
Mhm.
If Ryzen would have never come along, Intel would have remained complacent, and you can say that for any competitor. If there's no incentive to be inventive and be creative and push your products to new heights, then that probably won't happen. So when Ryzen
Mhm.
came along and gave them that huge challenge, we're going to start seeing Intel rising to that challenge.
Mhm.
Um,
And Intel, not a lot of people know about this, but so the x86 CPU architecture, there's the straight 32-bit that is licensed. AMD pays for that license from Intel, so they're actually working together on that, and it's the reverse for the AMD 64 because AMD came up with that,
yeah,
and Intel licenses that from AMD. So in the end, it doesn't really matter which one of them wins because at the end of the day, they're both getting money from it, and that's just the way it works in the CPU space.
hmm,
And that's like a perfect example of they're collaborating on the CPU architecture, but they're also competing really heavily.
very very heavily. Yeah, man. I can't wait until next year when we've got a three-way uh, space for the dedicated graphics stuff. When
Yep.
Intel really launches their consumer grade dedicated cards, and then we've got NVIDIA RTX and Radeon RX, and man, you know what though? Bottom line, it's a really good time to be a PC gamer. A very very
Hmm.
good time to be a PC gamer. I wanted to ask you before we wrap things up, what are some of your favorite games to play right now?
I haven't been playing a lot of games lately because of programming, but if I had to pick a small handful, um, it's always going to be Skyrim as number one. I love that open world fantasy feel. I like being able to swing a sword at a Draugr, chopping its head off while I'm blasting the one behind it with fire. I
Yes.
love being able to do that. Um, Fallout 4 is right behind that because instead of it being a fantasy open world setting, it's a futuristic, post apocalyptic and word. Words are hard.
World?
uh, yes, world.
World?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, dude. Hey,
Words are hard.
it's okay. I know words are hard.
Um,
So, but those are
but
both Bethesda
they
properties.
are.
How do you feel
Um,
about the Microsoft acquisition, or do you? Well, how do you feel about it?
have a lot of mixed feelings.
Yeah.
I'm worried that Microsoft will make Bethesda games an Xbox exclusive because between the two consoles right now, I'm leaning toward PS5, but Microsoft has been a lot more open toward, or a lot more nice, I guess you could say, towards the open source community as of late. Um, I don't expect them to open source Fallout 4 or Fallout 3 or Skyrim or
No, the
Oblivion
games
or
will
any of
never be
those.
open sourced, but I don't I like Phil Spencer has always been vocal about saying we're not trying to decrease the number of people that can play these games. We're trying to increase it.
Right. Um, I
So like
hope.
I'm kind of
I,
I kind of hope that we see the day where Skyrim 6 comes out on PlayStation 5 and there's an
mm,
Xbox logo at the front of it. Like that's just the wildest scenario, right? Xbox Game Studios and then the PS5. What?
oh, that'd be
Yeah.
great. I just hope that with how much they've been trying to get Windows apps onto Linux, like with Edge recently, I hope that they start being like, hey, we can make a lot of money just by porting some of these games over to Linux. And
But
Skyrim's been re-released so
I
many
d-
times, they could do another release for the
mm,
Linux version.
I don't think here's the thing. I'll level with you. I don't think there's enough incentive for a company that large to make dedicated native Linux ports of those games. However, I think it is in their best interest to devote a little bit less resources to just ensuring that it's Linux compatible, right? Ensuring that
Yeah.
that game goes to Steam
Hmm.
and works via Proton. That is enough. And I know that a lot of you, I've seen all of you guys in the comments saying, "Look, we need more dedicated Linux games." I hear you, but that takes so much more energy and money and resources than just ensuring that the game being released can run on Linux through something like Proton.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would love to see them do that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not the